Hello and welcome to part 9. We are going to talk about building your reskin machine. This is a really exciting part, guys, because this is what is going to help you go from 1 to 100, right? Before we were talking a lot about like how do you go from 0 to 1, and now we're going to go from 1 to 100. And a big part of this is step-by-step processes, and this is pretty much all about how to build an operations machine. Now, an operations machine doesn't necessarily mean it has to be tons and tons of people. It just has to mean that you're putting different moving parts together. That's what operations is all about, and making sure that those parts run really smoothly. So we're going to talk about all that sort of stuff and all about in the context of having a reskin business. This took me a long time to figure out, but once I did, it was like, I mean, we were able to produce more products than I've ever even dreamed because this machine was so well greased. And I learned a lot, and hopefully I can give you guys a lot of insights and tips so that you can build your own reskin machine and just start printing big product dollars. All right, so the goals today, number one is I really want to help you grow because smooth operations are critical for scaling. If you do not have a smooth operational process, you will never be able to scale to like on a big level. You'll be working 100 hours, 200 hours like all the time. And with scaling, you can't keep going up in hours. You just have to be going up in output. Okay, so the number one thing is I want to help you grow. Second thing is I want to help you understand the bigger picture, because when you're thinking about the bigger picture, you start to get away from the internal operations and the actual execution of everything, and you start seeing how can you manage everything. And that is a key too, is how eventually you need to step away and let the operations and the reskin machine do its thing. And the only way to do that is to see the bigger picture. That's why I talk about the bigger picture so much. It's because it's all about being on top of your business, not in your business. And then obviously just some do's and don'ts, some basic, hey, this is a good idea, this is not a good idea. And the reason why I want to talk about all this is because I want to reiterate, you guys, you are running a business, okay? Difference between a reskinner and someone who's building apps from scratch and from the ground up and all that sort of stuff is that they don't think about business as much as they think about product design and user experience and coding, and they think about the pieces and they get so caught up in all the details they forget to realize like this is an actual business that you're running. And that is the most important thing to remember is that, okay, how do I grow a business? And when you're growing a business, you also have to think about how do I do it well and how do I create a really good procedures and operations. And you want to think of this way from the start. That's why I'm telling you this. A lot of people would say, well, I don't need to think about business because I'm only building my first couple apps here. I've only just bought one source code. And I'm saying, no, you need to think about that from the start so that everything you do can be built into that business. I'm going to give you a lot of tips for helping to do that. And the third piece is because you need to start removing emotion from all this. You need to start saying like, you put in 3 source codes, you get six apps out. Here's how I measure success. Boom, 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 boom. And it's less about, oh man, I'm so fired up today. I'm going to be able to produce so much. And oh man, I feel awesome. That's why I'm going to be able to totally kill it this weekend. Versus, oh man, I just don't feel that good, and well, maybe I'll just do it tomorrow. And that's not what you want. Like, that is no place in business. What you want is you want to be able to run a machine that works for you day in, day out so that you can start scaling correctly. So the key pieces to remember, right? Reskin businesses focus on the operations. If any of you have ever seen the show The Profit, it's on CNBC in America. I don't know if you get CNBC where you are. Terrific show. You could probably Google it. Awesome show if you ever want to see how businesses are run. And what this guy talks about is 3 particular pieces of any business. 1 is process, how are things done. 2 is product, what are you selling. And 3 is the people, who's involved. And those are the 3 core components to any business this guy gets into, and that's pretty applicable to anything. But what we're talking about, the product doesn't really, we've talked about that. That's the source code. You know what you're getting yourself into. And the people is you and the people you hire. And we've talked about hiring a developer and all that sort of stuff. And now we're going to talk about the actual process. What do you need to be thinking about? We're not going to say like, here's exactly what a developer should do. Here's what a designer should do. We've talked a lot about that. You can put those pieces together in your own time. That's very executional. That's more for ebook style and just getting experience. What we're going to talk about is, how to do it, how to set up the right way, how to make sure that this is prepped to totally kill it. And we're going to focus on the operations. The skinning business is more than following just a few steps and getting your apps approved, right? It used to be just like, how can I get more into the store? Like, what can I do? Because in the old school, when it was kind of this free-for-all, it was all about like, oh, well, I'm a hustler and I push myself so hard and I can just work really hard and I can just like muscle everything through. Versus now, the most successful people in the reskin business are not necessarily business people, but people who think of themselves as a business person. And that is a very important distinction to make, is that you will not be able to do the hustler thing for more than a year. Like, you're going to burn out and you're going to say, like, well, what's the new hot thing? What else should I be doing? And I'm saying, if you think about it like a business, you can stop in a year, but it's still going to keep working for you because you don't actually have to be involved in it. And a hustler is always the guy who's just like, or the woman who's like doing it themselves. So I want you to start thinking like a business person. Start thinking about, how can I build and manage something? Because it's all about scalability and profitable automation. That's what we're talking about, and that's what the goals of skinning are all about. Okay, what this is not all about, when you're thinking about, I'm going to build a reskinning machine, what it's not going to do, it's not going to get you rich quickly. Okay, it's not about getting lucky, and it's not about having a first-time home run and any hacks and tricks. That is not what we're talking about today. We're talking about very, very small systems that are perfectly built, that are highly efficient, that just move very, very well, that you can slowly start to ramp up and increase in size. Okay, so operations. When you're thinking about operations, what do you think about? You've got your reskin, right? Like, you've got your source code. You want to start building a team. You want to start building a system. You want to start having operating procedures in place. What do you need to think about? The first is that you can't grow a broken system. Let me give you an example of this. You have a great developer, you have a great designer, and you have a good marketing strategy, but you have no one to pick keywords for you. So here's what happens. You buy source code, you send it to your developer, you send it to your designer, you get it all back, your developer goes in and uploads the app, and then you go in and you actually have to go pick the keywords and take the title and write the description and do the screenshots and everything else, and you have to upload it all. And then you upload it to the store, and then you start marketing it, blah, blah, blah. And you do this again, and you say, all right, well, this is working. Let's go back and let's do 5 source codes this time. And so your developer, your designer, they can scale efficiently, and your marketing team can scale efficiently. But now all of a sudden you're going in there and you're choosing 5 sets of keywords, and you're doing 5 sets of screenshots and writing 5 descriptions. And you can see that that is a broken system, because that is not, you can't scale that. Like, you are the problem in that system. And so you have to fix those systematic problems. And so the best way to do that is you got to focus on very small projects. And when I say small projects, that means you just get one source code and you keep the amount of moving parts very small. And you break it into as few moving parts as possible. Typically, that's going to be the least amount of images and the simplest source code. That's going to be the easiest way to start with a small project. And you want to make it work very well. How can you go step by step, like we talked about in the case study and all the previous modules? How do you go step by step and make sure that everything works perfectly? As you do that, you slowly increase the quality and the size of your source codes. You slowly start to say, okay, we've nailed this basic photo app. Let's see if we can take on an app that uses a database, like a wallpaper app. Let's see if we can do that within this system. You try that and you see what breaks within your operations, and you go from there. Once you get that nailed, you start scaling. That's when you say, all right, now we can do 5 at a time. That's when we can do 15 at a time. And you don't need to go say, oh, well, we need to fix a problem 15 times over because we didn't fix it when we were only doing 1 at a time. That's why it's so important. And it's okay to go backwards. I mean, that's going to happen. You don't see the same problems that you do on small projects than you do on like mass production. And it's okay to go back and say, like, all right, we need to fix this. But remember that the faster you do it on the smaller the system, the bigger the savings of time and money are going to be down the road. It's going to make a huge difference. And that's what I want to reiterate, is that when you're just getting started, keep these operations tight and smooth. Okay, it makes a huge difference, so you don't have to fix big problems later. So like I said, okay, so when you skinning and reskinning businesses is something you want to set up to manage. It's not something you want to set up to run. What I mean by that is you want to set this up so that every day you're going to your developer, your designer, your project manager, your virtual assistant, and your marketer, and you say, look, what's going on? Where are we? What's the deal? And they come to you and you say, okay, this is good. What can I do? You need anything from me? Here's the deadline. Like, what needs to happen? And there's like a reporting. They report to you. What you don't want is don't want to go in and then be like, well, here's a problem, and you say, okay, well, let me get in there and fix it, and you spend 2 hours of your day going in and actually running the operations instead of teaching them what to do. That is what you don't want to do. So you always want to be thinking about, how do I manage? How do I manage? How do I manage? It's not the funnest thing in the world, but it works. Okay, you need to set up and update your protocols to keep current. Things are going to change, right? Picking keywords is going to change. Screen sizes are going to change for your screenshots. Icon sizes are going to change. Developer SDKs are going to change. Everything is going to need to be updated. As they do, that's totally fine. You just need to update your processes and your protocols as they do. This is going to help from creating big problems down the road, so that when your developer needs to update 25 SDKs, they know exactly how to do it very efficiently. And you know, when you're talking about project management, this is kind of gets into a bigger discussion about how you do it, but just make sure everyone's on the same page. Now you can use Google Docs to track different timelines and account logins and everything. You can use Trello. If you don't know Trello, go to Trello.com. It's an awesome resource that'll help you with project management. Basecamp is kind of the big one in the industry. All these can be really helpful, but that can be something that you want to do. Now here's a pro tip. Here's something that I do all the time that I did especially when I was working with big development teams and trying to get these operations up and running, is when you teach or explain anything. Okay, a good example, a developer comes to you and says like, hey, what category should I pick, or you know, what should I? Here's a good example. Where should I put the SDK in the code? And if you don't know how to do this, don't worry about it. But this is just an example. And I could say, oh well, you know, usually you want to do it here. Usually you want to do it here. And I would say, no, actually, let's just standardize this. And I would say, okay, hold on. And I would do a screenshot, and I would go into the source code, and I would go into the right file, and I would point to it literally with a pointer. And I would say, put it in here in every source code. This is where we want to put every app SDK in each source code. And I would do a screencast of that. And then I would write it up in a PDF, and I would send that to the developer, and I would say, this is what we do for adding app SDKs. I would never get a question ever again about that. And every time it was done perfectly right. Every time that a question would come to me that is something that would happen more than once, I would video record it, I would write it down, and it was not the funnest thing in the world, but oh my gosh, did it help. And that is just a great thing you can do. So here's kind of how you should be thinking about the systems in the organization. If you want to go step by step, you want to go linearly, and you want to knock down every problem in the step of your process. When I say step by step, I mean think about every step that it takes to go from I just bought a source code to I'm marketing my app now. Think about every step that needs to happen and who needs to be involved to make that process happen. Now the ebooks, we obviously walk through all this. Definitely check those out if you want them. But just go through the process yourself. Like think through everything, single step, and get really, really detailed. And think about what the developer does. Think about the designer, the keywords, the icon, uploading, the reviews, everything else. And within each of those steps, say, is every single piece of this documented and done correctly in a way that they will not need to come to me and figure this out for themselves? Like, what about this are they going to have problems with? What potential issues are they going to run into? And map that out, and then start documenting that. And when you do get problems, identify those problems, video cast a solution, give it back to them, make sure it doesn't happen again. And guys, realize it is totally okay to go slowly. And I actually recommend that, because the slower you go at the beginning, the less mistakes you're going to make, and the better it's going to be down the road. And the more you can walk away, the better your system is built. This is actually like a big litmus test, is that I will go away on a trip or on a business trip, or I'll go home for a weekend or whatever, and I will shut my computer off, I will shut my phone off, I will not check email, I won't do anything, I won't respond to any questions, and I'll come back 3 days later, and I'll see what broke. I'll see what problems were like unsolvable for my team. And whatever those things were, that's what I will know that I have to create solutions for. But this is how you measure success, because the more you can walk away, the more you have a business that doesn't need you, the more you can go and you can start working on getting bigger deals, or getting more source codes, or building more app products, or whatever it may be. But that is how you want to think about this. When you're measuring the success, when you're measuring, what your team's doing, always remember that, App Annie, Google Analytics, this is really going to play a big role in your decision making, right? So when you're doing your operations, one thing you will always be doing until you have a project manager or a COO type person who's making the kind of strategic decisions, is you want to be looking at analytics, and so that you could turn to your team and say, all right, well, this isn't working, this is. These apps are great to produce, these apps aren't. These ones are getting downloads, these are not. And you want to be able to turn back to them and say, here's what we should be working on. And maybe the music apps you're building have a couple problems that the casino apps didn't. And when you shift over to music, you got to start thinking about that. But you always want to wake up and be able to say, is my team working on the right stuff? Because you've got this machine pumping out products is it, and your job is pointing it in the right direction, and that's what the analytics will do, so that you do get a high ROI. It's going to tell you what themes work. You can start doing some research. You can start reading more blog posts. You can start looking at the App Store every morning, and then you start baking in the cost for the risks and rewards. This is more about just running your business correctly. But it's like the key thing to remember here is that you need to be able to confidently go to your team and say, this is the direction we need to start going in. And it can change on a weekly basis if needed, as long as it's not messing up your operations. But always be looking at the analytics. When you automate, reskinning is easy to do. Like once you have everything systematized, you can really, it is really easy to walk away from. The key to be profitable is about being able to produce the right apps and update the right way and listen to the reviews and have the right updates and do all the things that the data is telling you. But the actual reskinning process, once it's systematized, is not that much work. The key is getting a system that is ironclad and runs very smoothly. And I don't want to make light of that because it can be difficult at first, but you will get really good at it. You'll be shocked at how good you get at that when you start thinking about this from the get-go. Because the goal is to have this so wired that all you need to do is hand your assistant or your developer a code. This is why I was able to make, we were making 80 apps a month. Think about that, 80 apps a month for a while. And the reason why is because I could take a source code, or I could take 10 source codes, and I could just dump them over to my developer or my personal assistant or my virtual assistant with a sheet. And it said, here's the source codes, here's what you need to do with them, get it done in 2 weeks. And this system was so tight and so dialed that they were able to do that, and I didn't need to be part of it. And I could go out and do direct deals and all these other kind of crazy advertising things. And when you put the system together, you put the whole thing and you create your own reskinning system that's custom built for what you want to do. You want to start hiring people, you want to start hiring teams. We talked a lot about this in the previous module, but you start putting these teams and these people together, or you be a part of it to get going, and then you slowly outsource yourself. But you're eventually going to have to bring in people and technology to help you grow. You want to start with a slow, small project and make it perfect. When you're just starting out, that is part of the education, okay? It's not all about, hey, do you know how to code or do you know how to design? A lot of it is, do I know how to hire people? Do I know how to fire people? Do I know how to get more output out of people? How do I get people more productive? Like, what do I do? Do I know how to solve people's problems in a really proactive way? Am I giving them the information they want? You want to make that process really perfect, and investing in that early on is very cheap, and it's very, very good to do before you start spending a lot of money. And the goal is always to have everything is just so wired, dialed in, and you just hand it off. Like I said, you just want to be able to walk away. From an investment standpoint, that's how you want your business to run anyway. It's also very sellable at that point too. So big kind of key top level stuff. The system is the most important part. Then you start adding the better source codes to that system. You adjust accordingly, and then you start adding better strategies. You start to look at the data. You start to do more networking. You start to talk to better people, and things start working really well. If you want to do some research, I've talked about franchises many times. The franchise model is so similar to reskinning. It's awesome. Check out that show, The Profit on TV. You're going to get a lot of really good ideas from that. But this is a really good place to start. Key takeaways, just to wrap this up, is you want to start really simple. And then you want to add on to that, and you want to scale it. You want to start with a small project. You want to do it once. You want to find out what the problems were, and you want to fix them. Now you don't have to go, that doesn't mean you have to go get a new source code. What that means is you can reskin that app and say, look, it took us 4 weeks last time, let's see if we can get it done in 2 weeks. And then you say, let's see if we can get it done in 1 week. And then you go, okay, now we've got this dialed. Let's go to something a little bit bigger. Let's try a game source code. And you say, all right, it took us in 4 weeks. Now it's going to take us 2 weeks. That's how you iterate. You start small, and then you get more complicated, and you get better and better and better. You actively train and you support people. Do not shy away from this. This is one of the greatest investments you can make, and realize that that is part of your responsibility as a business owner and as someone who's hiring somebody else, is you need to put them in a position to win. If there's nothing else about hiring people that I've learned, is that almost 90% of the time, if your employees don't do what you want, or they don't achieve what you were hoping they would achieve, or they don't solve the problem the way you want, it's your fault. It's because you didn't train them correctly, and you didn't put them in a position to succeed. And you need to recognize that and realize that that's part of what you're doing. But by doing it now, you are not going to have to do this forever, and it's only going to be a couple hours of your week versus 80 hours of doing it yourself. As the systems get more complicated, as you add more moving parts, you're going to have to do more training. That's not a bad thing. Just recognize that and be okay with that. Document everything. Create these video screencasts. Create the PDFs. Put them in a central location. Create a place for people to go and say, yes, this is what I have a problem. I have a question. Because if you ever need to fire your team and you go get a new one, they're going to say, hey, here's all our documents. Here's our operating procedures. They're going to say, oh my gosh, like we can walk into this. We don't need anyone. What's that's also great about when I sold about 110 of my apps a while back. If I had all this documentation written down and it packaged up really nicely with videos and packaging, I probably sold my business for like 50% more money. Not even kidding. This stuff is gold when it comes to making your business valuable. Like we were talking about, manage, do not execute. It's going to be really tempting to get in there and be like, hey, look, I'll just do this myself. But if you are trying to scale your company, do not make that mistake. Just manage someone, train them, make a video, make sure they can solve the problem again. And as always, when it comes to scaling, efficiency is always better than size. I don't care if you have 100 developers on your team. If they cannot efficiently produce things, they're going to be more expensive and they're going to be slower than my team that has 20 people that everything is just perfectly dialed in and running smoothly. And always remember that efficiency will always be better than size. All right, guys, I hope that was helpful, and I will see you in the next video.